Your Steve Jones Show podcast is loading now. The Steve Jones Show podcast is sponsored by Sunbury Motors, North 4th Street in Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
It is always great as we go to beautiful Frisco, Texas, to the Star, no less, and bring in my good friend, Tony Knopp. Hello, sir.
Hello. From Texas, yeah. Enjoyed the Rangers last night. Looking forward to Rangers and Astros. That's going to be a rivalry.
That will be a rivalry series that'll be fun to watch. Two very talented teams.
Tony and I, through the Twins, though.
Yep, and Tony and I, by the way, are already making Big Ten football and basketball plans.
So. Oh, I can't wait. This is going to be so much fun. It's so much more exciting to go to Happy Valley than to Corvallis.
Oh.
Nothing against Oregon State, but I'm glad we're not going back to Corvallis or Pullman.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and we say that with all due respect to two fine institutions and communities.
Yes, exactly.
All right, so we are at a point now. We've talked about TV contracts extensively. You're sitting there in an advisory role. You understand how tickets operate, what interest happens to be with ratings. I've got three properties on the table. I have the NBA, I have the college football playoff, and I have Notre Dame football. How would you rank them in order of what a priority should be for a network in terms of bidding?
Oh, man. It's so hard to know because I was just reading today and talking to some people who know things at Major League Baseball that there's a chance that the NFL might buy ABC. And because there's a concern about the broadcast rights and how there's cord cutting happening, and that's NFL's cash cow right now. It comes down to what a network is really looking to achieve. The NBA has a very young demographic, and they have a lot of content, which is kind of the old model of sports media, right? It's how ESPN came to fruition, where they really were just trying to fill 2 hours at a time, but the satellite dish was so cheap, they gave it to them for 24, and they filled it with whatever they could. The most powerful of the three is very clearly college football playoffs. Nothing drives tribalism and drives viewership like football, and college football is second only to the NFL right now. And what's really interesting is there was a concern, and we talked about this years ago, about how the next generation might not be attending football games or caring as much. Remember we talked about how Michigan's attendance was down during the Rich Rod era and the like. And with NIL, the transfer portal, and just the way that these schools have leveraged social media and the power of brand like, Coach Prime is doing, that is completely flipped on its head. Mm-hmm. College football numbers are through the roof this year, especially when it comes to viewership and what people are watching. So it's really a question of how long a deal do these properties choose to strike? And as we've talked about, because if you strike a short-term deal and bet on yourself, you hope it doesn't backfire. So that sometimes leads to, maybe we take the long-term deal and take the money. But if you do that, you could end up like the ACC with ESPN, mm-hmm. or end up like, what the Pac-12 did with Fox.
Right.
Whereas, the SEC and the Big Ten, they bet on themselves. They gave themselves a short enough time span that, hey, if this grows exponentially, we're going to be able to double down on that. And that's what I'm most interested about with CFP in particular, and then the NBA behind it, because the NBA has changed a few times over the past few years.
That's right.
How much are they going to leverage, the value of a dollar now versus we go back to the negotiating table in 3 years, 5 years, 7 years?
Well, in this, we were talking, years ago, we were talking about size of facility. And Buffalo at one point, Orchard Park was an 80,000 seat stadium. Their new stadium they're going to build is 65. This is a trend you and I talked about 10 years ago, that you'll see smaller stadiums. That way tickets are more in demand than before. But you're right. The interest, the ratings are up across the board for everybody. But I also find it interesting that the viewership on Amazon Prime is up too. What indicator is that?
It's interesting that we still don't really know how to track ratings on Amazon Prime and online. We've got an idea of what we think is a viewership number, but this is what led you and I could spend 3 hours talking about the writer's strike and what actually ended up happening there. It's big news at our way. It comes down to this idea that cord cutting was going to wreck the broadcast networks and that sports was the last thing that was going to hold it together. And it's proving to be true. Sports is actually getting more popular. As cords are getting cut, people are moving more towards sports. So that's why you see Apple being really aggressive, and they're saying they might put $2 billion into their next deal, which $2 billion for Apple is pocket change. Right?
Exactly.
And it's not a surprise that Amazon and Apple and the others are getting into this, because it's really the last bastion of viewership, is this live event that people are interested in. So, and it's interesting you talk about the size of the stadium and how it's kind of gone both ways. Everybody has built smaller stadiums, but because of it, now they're saying, at least people that I know that are in charge, that the World Cup finals are going to be in Dallas, not in New York or Los Angeles,
right,
because Dallas has a big enough stadium and they have a big enough security fence that they can put around it.
They can get over 90,000 in that building because they can move stands around in there that people don't realize.
Yeah. And so, because you would think, globally, it's got to be New York or Los Angeles, right? You got a $5 billion stadium in Los Angeles, and then New York is New York. But it sounds like it's almost a sure thing it's going to be at Jerry World.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
But good for Jerry, right?
No. Hey, no. Hey, look, it's his place. That's his money. Just like it's Robert Kraft's money at Gillette Stadium. It's not, Jerry Jones is not out there, to his credit, taking. He probably took infrastructure money to make sure that you had 4-lane roads going from Globe Life Park over to his place, but that's his money that he put in there.
Oh, he just expanded his internal parking lot because he's got more grandkids. And fun fact, I'm just bringing it up because I'm here and I've seen it. Cotton Bowl has been a partner of ours for a very long time.
Right.
He actually has his own suite that you always see him on TV, but he actually has an elevator in that suite in the back that goes up to a bird's nest. That's a private room just for him to get away from people to watch the game when it gets tight.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing is built around Jerry. It's
sure.
a toy store.
Oh, no. I did, because as you know, I did the Cotton Bowl.
Yeah.
And when we were there,
best broadcasting setup there is. You got the best seats there is for broadcasting.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Okay. Here's one of the like no big deal things to most people, but they actually have a bathroom in the back of the booth. Okay. It's like because Brad Sham and I were talking about it. Brad says, I know we're at the goal line, Steve, because we had the Cowboys booth. Yep. He says, and I talked to Jerry, and he said, Brad, I love you, but I need to sell that stuff at the 50-yard line.
Yep, that's what it's here for, and that's what we're talking about. Smaller stadium, more hospitality, more corporate dollars. I mean, what they're realizing on the team side, and we're going back to our media point, is that there's certain ways that you make dollars. You have your ticket sales, you have your sponsorship sales, you have your hospitality sales. You don't need as many seats to do that, and then you have the revenue and the media rights. And that's the concern with the NFL, is that the media rights is such a massive part of the NFL.
Right.
And what Bob Iger's doing with selling off ESPN and having all of these different suitors coming in, including the NBA, it causes some concern. Right? This is how you're making your money. So it's going to be so fascinating, because everything we've known to be the norm is not the norm anymore. We don't really know how many people are watching on the streaming services, but we know the streaming services are more powerful with the demographic that's coming up, the 13 to 25-year-olds, which are the ones that are going to, we're going to sell to advertisers over the next 5, 7 to 10 years. And that's the TV deals we're talking about, right? It's always interesting because when you're a listener and you hear it and you think, I don't really care about the term of a TV deal, but then you start to put into perspective that, well, that TV deal takes us in 5 years from now, and the person they're going to be selling to is currently a freshman in high school.
Right.
It matters, right? And it matters quite a bit.
And this is where...
Otherwise, you end up like the ACC.
This is where the 18 to 34 comes in. That's why if you are potentially skewing younger, so that's the NBA deal, and in some part that's the college football playoff deal. This is where MLS has done well, because they do well with the 18 to 34 market, and it's not talked about often enough.
No, they do fantastic with that market, and baseball's doing better with that market this year all of a sudden, which nobody saw coming.
Right.
I mean, 2 years ago was baseball is going to die. It's all old people that watch it. And now all of a sudden they made a bunch of changes. Attendance is up 9.8% this year across the board, which is egregious. And people that are younger are watching it. So MLS, there's a reason Apple did the MLS deal. There's a reason Apple backed Messi on this. They know what they're doing, right? And they know that, eventually they're going to build this up and be, look, it's the media capital of the world. It's a matter of time. before we get to the point where the infrastructure over here is strong enough to support that league in the way it needs to be supported. Mm-hmm. And they know what they're doing when it comes to, people coming up and playing the game. I mean, soccer participation is higher than any other sport, while football participation has dropped. Right. So there's conversations about all of it, but what's the most fascinating about what you said is how do you rank the three TV deals right now? Right now, CFP, then NBA.
Yep.
But 10 years from now, who knows?
Right. Who knows? Exactly.
Doing all the right things.
See, that's what I want to see when the World Cup comes here. What does that then do to the pecking order that we're talking about now? Is the World Cup the fulcrum that launches soccer or whatever to a point where it becomes a must-have property in the country?
Right. It launched MLS the first time in '94. MLS came out of the '94 World Cup. But now it's an actual league, right? It's a real league with a lot of people paying attention. The Chicago Fire, Messi himself sold out Chicago Stadium with 60-something thousand fans.
Right.
Right. And they even said, "We'll refund you if he doesn't play." He didn't play. But it's changing everything by bringing these international stars in, and then you can eventually build your national stars and go from there. But it's really fascinating to look at because the amount of money that pours into sports. You talk to people who are involved on the Commander sale, which there really wasn't another bid. So Jeff Bezos never really got involved in that. I know the bankers who are on that deal. So what's happening is they're saying, okay, well, the money has to eventually stop. But there's the problem, Steve, is there's too much money because now the leagues are allowing private equity to get involved. They're allowing investment groups to buy teams. They keep waiting for this quote-unquote bubble to pop, and it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger.
Well, we know with the Pac-12, and of course it all fell apart. And yep. So now this story goes, and was it a professor from Stanford, something like that? He valued the league at $50 million per school, and you're like, okay.
You want me to drag Stanford? Because I'll do it right now. You mean the institution that turned down 75% of their perfect SAT scores because they're so good and they have such a great graduate school of business. They just got outmaneuvered by literally every single school in the Big Ten and all the others that moved to the Big 12. You're supposed to be the center of the business world where all these great minds come from, and you got left behind.
Yeah. Because
talk about a misstep on the most public stage.
Yeah.
How is that not embarrassing? You're writing case studies on how to run business. Now, I have nothing against Stanford. I'm an SC grad. I got into Stanford. I grew up near there.
Yep.
But I find that hilarious.
I did as well. But in reality, what did the Big Ten move do to really essentially save the future for USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington?
Yeah. We talked a couple of years ago about the possibility of USC going
exactly
independent,
yep.
Right?
Independent.
And
that's right.
That's growing more difficult. When you talk about Notre Dame football, right? That is an institution that, as much as they're a USC rival and they're playing each other this weekend, USC's not on that level when it comes to national exposure. They're not the team of the Northeast. They don't have the history. They have a lot of history, but not as much as Notre Dame. They had to align with a super conference at some point, and all these super conferences are aligning with the college football playoff. We all know this, and it's becoming the Super League, which is what it should be and what it has to be. I think that USC and UCLA were going to find a strong home either way. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think Oregon and Washington, who you pointed out, those are the ones that are the bigger concerns, right? The public university that is UCLA has so much storied depth with the basketball program.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But Oregon and Washington, public schools really just came to prominence in Oregon in the last 25 years. UW was much more prominent in the 90s than they have been until now. They got Penix playing quarterback there, who I don't know how he's still playing quarterback. I feel like he was Indiana's quarterback 9 years ago.
Yeah. You have no idea how many Michael Penix Day games I've done. I've done plenty.
How old is he at this point? Every time he's on the TV, I think I watched him beat Penn State.
I think
in the 2020 COVID season.
Yeah, I think he's older than Zach Wilson. I'm just kidding.
It's crazy, but it saved sports at those institutions. And here's what people don't understand: when I say it saves sports at those institutions, sports at Stanford and Cal are dead. Stanford and Cal now are Olympic sports schools, which is great. I mean, that's what the origination of the university sports was, and that's what they kind of want to be. They're going to be really good at track and swimming and, those sorts of things. But when it comes to revenue generation, basketball and football, they will be off the map in the next 5 years. They just will. They will be as competitive at football as Vanderbilt is, and we won't hear about them in basketball.
Right.
Because it's very difficult to recruit on the West Coast. And now you're competing with 4 schools that are playing in the Big Ten.
Right.
And your pitch is we're in the ACC from the Bay Area. This doesn't work.
Is it your sense, and this is something we won't know until they actually send them out, but the Big Ten, and it's going to depend on who it is, but when Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State go out there, it's not that USC will sell out, because they will. And when Penn State goes out there next year, that's going to be a sellout.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Can they sell out UCLA?
Yes. But more importantly, it's not about selling out the building. It's about the ad.
Okay.
Right? I mean, you're limited at the Coliseum. Let's use the Coliseum as an example because they're a global brand that people know. Right?
Yep.
You're limited in what you can sell, and you and I both know they're going to sell all of it. Right? All of their suites, all of their tickets, unless they get egregious on their pricing, they're going to sell that out. There's no way they won't.
Right.
But you don't have a limitation on that now because you're selling. It's going to be the big noon kickoff, or it's going to be the night game. You are going to sell ads for it, and those ad dollars go through the roof. Those are the ad dollars that pay for the broadcast deals. That's where the money comes. So when you bring Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State out here to the West Coast, that's the biggest differentiator for the Big Ten. It's just the TV dollars. It's going to be through the roof.
And by the way, just so everybody knows, the Big Ten, which has 9 Friday night games, will expand to 9 Friday night games next year. Now, Penn State and USC are not going to be playing on a Friday night.
No.
So you know, they won't be.
No.
But that does tell you about the inventory.
Maryland and Rutgers will.
Yep. Welcome to the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, exactly.
Great to see you.
Northwestern at UCLA. Enjoy that.
Welcome. Enjoy it. That's great.
Yeah.
It's your basic 4:30 start, 7:30 Eastern time. Great.
Yeah. They would put UCLA at Rutgers on a Wednesday night if they could.
Don't tempt them.
I know, right? Doesn't matter. Just go play. You don't have to go up against it yourself.
Okay, I'll leave it with this final question. You're out there. You're well connected. I'm not going to get into all the connections you have there because that's not, that's our business because we know that. Have they talked to you about the pluses and the minuses to them of the Big Ten just from a competition point of view?
Oh, yeah. It's so more importantly, it's interesting. I looked at it and thought what everybody did originally. So Mike Brown is a friend of mine. I know he's not involved anymore, but he was very involved in the move that was done.
And he's still getting paid.
He's still getting paid. Andy Enfield is a friend of mine. Andy's kids play volleyball on the same club team that my kids play on, and I know a lot of Lincoln staff, so I know them very well. And all of our belief originally was this is just going to make it way harder to get to the playoff. And why are we doing this, right? The Pac-12 is a lot easier to walk through. But the recruiting impact has been significant because what I didn't realize, and this is what Mike and Lincoln's head of recruiting told me, was we're losing too many schools to the SEC, or too many kids to the SEC and the Big Ten.
Right.
So even if we can walk through the Pac-12, we're not competitive anymore. The days of Mike Williams coming from Florida to play at SC are over. And that was the whole purpose in all of this is, look, we don't have the Pac-12 never had the ability to have those highlight games. So USC had to play those games out of conference.
Right.
One thing USC is very proud of is they're one of only, I think maybe the only one, or one of only 2 or 3 schools that has never played a Division 1 AA team.
Right.
Or FCS, whatever they call it now.
Yep.
They've only played top division teams. But they have to do that because nobody's excited about at Oregon State, at Washington State, at Cal, at Stanford. Right. I mean, if you look at the teams that are considered middle tier in the Big Ten, their draw is significantly larger than the middle of the division out here. And that's been the biggest differential for them is recruiting. They said, watch the recruiting classes. They're going to be significantly stronger. And I kind of said, well, Lincoln was going to do that anyways. They said, no, just watch.
Yep. And the other part is the expansion to 12, and maybe we'll see to 16. You have more wiggle room to get into the playoff than you actually do now.
Once you get to 16, you'll have more. And look, I mean, these conferences are getting bigger. Big 12 is about to add Gonzaga. They're going to be the Big 17.
Yeah.
I'm certain that, the Pac is looking at different options. I know San Diego State thing's not going to happen, and, they're not going to be able to make that happen. But, look, we're headed the right direction, right? And this is the direction I've thought we should have been headed the whole time. I mean, you're around these kids. You see what it takes to be an athlete. I was an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I had all this. I could share stories of cheating all day long, of how they tried to help us with our homework and the like. But I played a non-revenue generating sport, right? I played basketball. I played volleyball. Volleyball didn't generate revenue. I had to do my class. These kids, the amount of work they put into this is a job.
Yeah.
And it is a major. And they are learning how to live in the real world in something that can make them money as coaches, as trainers, and all of these other things. So I'm just happy to see it going the way it's going because I think it is the right thing for the student athlete. And great, let them make money, and then everybody else will make more money too. And it's funny that NIL we thought was going to poison the well. It's actually made it more interesting.
Yeah. It's
made it easier for sleeping giants to come back, and it's created significant gains when it comes to viewership. It's all the opposite of what a lot of the purists thought.
See, this is what dinner is going to be like. All right.
Yeah.
Except there's going to be hours of this. Well,
I can't wait.
Tell everybody at the Star we said hi, including the Eagles fans who listen to the show.
Yeah, that's right. I'm a Niner fan, so I let them know about it all day today.
Perfect, Tony.
Right.
My brother. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. Go Birds. We'll talk soon.